Oh, welcome. Yeah, glad you joined us here. And see how I did that with some sincerity there. Sunny California today. We're up in the 90s. We're at that time of year where it could be 90 one day and we'll be 65 tomorrow. Who knows? But happy you're here. And today we're going to talk about macros and shortcuts. So the big question is, what is a macro? If you haven't been a programmer, or you haven't worked in maybe Excel macros or Word macros or someplace else, you may not be familiar with them, but they're really simple. It's just a fancy word for stringing together a set of commands so that with one action, either a click or a keystroke, you can have Studio One or any other program that supports macros execute a series of steps. And sometimes it's just combining two keystrokes, and I'll show you that in just a minute. And then sometimes it's combining more. And then every once in a while, it's doing a very complex sequence, but it's stringing together things that 98% of the time we could do manually. We'd go through menu, pick this item, menu, pick this item, menu, pick this, select this. And the macro will just combine them all into one operation. So they're really, you should think of them as shortcuts. And then we'll assign them the keystrokes. And they're really a sister or a big sister to keyboard shortcuts. A keyboard shortcut is going to allow you to have any command that's up on the menus and then have it assigned to one single keyboard shortcut, one keystroke. That's what I should say there. But the macro is a group of those all together, and I'll just show you a couple of them here. So I'm going to switch over. Of course, every time I switch, it takes a few seconds for that to happen. So we'll switch over, and then we'll be off and running with macros and, of course, keyboard shortcuts. So here we go. Let's look at Studio One. So now you're looking at my copy of Studio One, and I just have a little sample file up here. And I have lots of colors. This, you don't have to do this. I have a whole color coding system for behind the scenes. It tracks our different colors if I turn them on, and you can if you don't like these, by the way, you can click on this and switch this to something else. If you just want it to be bland, you can be bland. Okay, it's totally up to you. So don't think that, oh gosh, his colors are really ugly. Well, I mean, sometimes they are. I have this concept that I have certain things just are blazing ugly, and it tells me what that is at a glance. I happen to know what that's all about. So macros. Oh, this is the macro toolbar. So if you have version 3, it's automatically installed. And the toolbar, it doesn't show by default. You need Robo Guy here. That's what I call him. So when you look at Robo Guy, you're going to see, when you click on him, the macro toolbar display. And I never do this, but you can break this out. And when you break that out, then it went down right to here. And so this does mean that if in your usage you wanted to put this thing down at the bottom, you could. I don't do that. I'm going to put him back, and I like it sitting right here at the top. And there's a couple things. Now yours won't look like this. Initially it starts off, and maybe I should show you the total default, but I'm just showing you what it's going to look like when we're done. I've taken the original commands that were there, and then I've customized mine with a whole set of macros. And over on the left, there's the wrench. And I don't know, there's wrenches all over this, but whenever you see a wrench in Studio One, it's something to do with setup. There's a couple down here in the toolbar and the transport bar here where you can get to some other settings down here, some wrenches. There's even one over here in the mix panel. There's a wrench here. So they're all over. Anytime you see a wrench, it means there's some configuration options available for that part of Studio One. Okay, so but we're going to worry about this wrench today. And this gets us to our macro organizer. Now, I mentioned, what is a macro? And most of you do know this, but here's a simple example. I bounce tracks sometimes, and I do a lot of other things, but is bounce track hard? No. But what happens with bounce track is you need to, or with bouncing, and what bouncing does is this is an event here, and this is an event here, and this is an event here. These are separate events right now. And I could take this one here and put in an extra event. Let me split that here. I'll split that on the cursor. So I just made 2 events. Now here's an event, here's an event. And then later, some people are really wigged out by these events. They just don't like events. And so let me put in another event here and make sure that we get lots of events flowing just so you see. Now, some people want to take those events and turn them all into one. And it's really easy to do. What I would have to do is go up here and choose Edit, Select, and Select All on Tracks. Is going to select all the events on the track. So now you see they're all selected. They all have their little drag handles. We could change their volumes. We could change their fade in and fade out of each individual event. And we could take this event here and I could fade it in and do some other things. Lots of things you can do with events. I'm going to undo that. And so, but in order to bounce them, meaning combine them all into one event, take all the individual events that are here and combine them into one, you need to select them all. So what you could do from the menu is Edit, Select, Select All on Tracks, and you'll see that they are all selected. They all have their little handles and they're all highlighted. And then the next thing we could do is go over here to Event, and there's something called Bounce Selection. And the selected events will be combined into one. Now that's all one event. So see how that is? I undo that. And so that's no big deal. It's not too bad. I could go in anytime, Edit, Select all on tracks, and then come back to the menu, the event menu, and Bounce Selection, and that'll do it. Well, if you do something like that all the time, then you want to think about, could I put those together into a macro? And yes, you can, as long as we have something selected in this track. So I'll select this here. And when I click this, then it selects all of them and combines them into one. It's really like a two. I will show you that macro in a second right now. So we go into the macro organizer. Now, if you're in version 2, by the way, you do need to go and install this. It's available on version 2, but it doesn't install by default. So version 3, it does install. And hello, Ellen, I see you there. Be sure to install it on version 2, but I'm going to assume right now you're working on version 3. If not, ask in the Facebook group. But we're going to look at that. We're going to find that menu here. And the one I used was Bounce Track. So we look at through the macros that are there, and I'm going to edit an existing one. And what you're going to see is over on the right-hand side, we'll go through this in just a second when we build our macro from scratch. But what is occurring here is that the whole macro, Bounce Track, so, and then I put a little note. I recommend you do this because you look at these later. It's like, what in the heck did I do? Why did I do it? I've even gone to, I'll show you in a minute, I started dating them. Not dating them like, Tinder or something, but I mean dating them in terms of I'll add the date. So this will now, you'll see on some of them will have a date right at the very end so that I can tell when I created it, because every time I do this, 2 months later, I realize, oh, in this context, it doesn't work. And I do an update. And then therefore, by having the date on it, it tells me which version, and it's easy to know which one I'm working with. But Edit, Select All on Tracks, Event, Bounce Selection. And so what you can see here is this is only 2 steps, but it's cut down into 1. I'm going to cancel that. So that's that particular macro. And then you'll see I have a lot of them. A lot of them. Now, the number one way to get macros, steal them. That's probably too strong a word. First they come with some, and then there are places where you can go and you can get some more from the exchange. And then if you're on some of the groups, if you need a macro to do something, ask me. Other people can create them for you, and you can pass them around. But the point is that the way I learned about them was to look at what somebody else did. This was somebody else's, I'm almost positive. And I go, wow, okay, now why did they do this? And why did they do this? I kind of had to reverse engineer everything. Now, we're not going to do it that way, because here's the next thing about macros. If you're going to get sophisticated with them, then you need to reverse engineer them, and you need to figure out all sorts of things about them. The lazy guy's way, the way I do it, first, I find somebody else that has something similar, and I borrow theirs, and then I learn what they did. But in the beginning, what we really need to do is we need to look at the menus, and we need to look at what's there, and virtually everything that's available on the menu, you can do via a macro. And so I'm sure you've already done this, but you know that if you choose keyboard shortcuts from help, and you choose that, and I've already got it open on another window, I'll drag it over here. When you do that, you get this great reference, and it looks like this. It builds right in your browser. And the great thing about this keyboard shortcuts are, number one, if you're on the PC, it gives you the PC keyboard mappings. So control, and you'll hear me all the time. I'm saying control command plus, which I'm giving the PC, the Mac, and the thing. Control Z, command Z. I'm always having to say both of those. Well, this is specific to you. If you're on the Mac, you're not going to see Alt. You'll see your option, as you should. You're not going to see control. You'll see command. But what you do want to do is go and look at your keyboard shortcuts. Every once in a while, open this, when you're bored, and scan through it and see what's there. I have learned all sorts of shortcuts in Studio One from going through and looking at these and finding a perfect one will be if we get to markers. Let me go, here's markers. This one here, I never knew about until I happened to find, let me pull that up a little bit. It's called set start and end to selection, Alt Y. And this is actually the basis for a macro that I created, and it's behind the scenes here. This is called mark start end. So it sets the marker to the start and the end of the track, which is something that we're all doing all the time whenever we're using this macro, or whenever we're going to export, we need to have the start set and the end set. And Laura, I see your question there. Your macro organizer is empty. Should you see something there? Yes, you should. There are a couple occasions where, depending on if we upgraded, depending on a couple factors, where if that is blank, contact me offline and I'll show you how to reset it so that it should start with some macros on it, and you should at least have this wrench. If you don't have the wrench, then you need to get in touch with me, and I'll make sure that we solve that. So anyone else who has that, the macro toolbar, if it's blank, can happen if you've upgraded, and there's a couple other cases where that will happen. But once we get it set up once, it'll work the rest of the time forever. But keyboard shortcuts are a big deal, and you can learn about things like this. I just didn't know Alt Y that would allow me to set this, and this macro we'll look at a little later. But I'm going to do the main one that I want. So, but I want to let me say that a little more elegantly. I want to get to the macro that's the most important one to me, and then I'll show you some others. And at the very end, I have some bonuses. I've got this other really, really cool thing that will save you a bunch of time and help you learn shortcuts and keystrokes and all sorts of other things about Studio One. So well, I'll just show you. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do this macro. And I have to tell you, when I started this, the first time I saw this in a Personas group, I can't even remember. And I do have this one problem. I scan 3 different Studio One groups every day, plus there's a forum, and I don't scan that every day. About once a week, I go in and I look for things that would apply to us. And in the beginning, when I had Studio One in the previous version, I mean, I was on it almost every day, just looking for good tips and tricks and things I could use to speed up. And I still scan this, and I found there was this one thing where somebody said, I want to restart. So, punch and roll, we're right here. And my pre-roll is set up so that, what do I have? I have probably 3 seconds of pre-roll. And those of you that know me know that if you set this to 2.4 and you set this to 120 in your template, then when you look at this pre-roll is going to be seconds. You can ignore the bars, that's seconds. Okay, so my pre-roll is 3 seconds. And somebody said, well, I want to restart with one single command here. And so I'm going to pre-roll here. So what am I at? I'm at 208. My pre-roll is going to go back to roughly 205, and the recording will start here. Now, I don't have this plumbed in right now to have you'll hear it through my speakers. It'll be just quiet, but I don't have it that, I'm assuming I have that turned up some. Let me make sure that's turned up enough here. And the only thing that's going to happen is we're going to press record. Radios, etc. all shut down. Remember, and okay, now that's the bozo switch. I don't know if you guys know about that. You probably don't have that. That's something that only an advanced user like me has. And the bozo switch is where I just didn't do that right, because my track was not armed. And the funny thing about Studio One is that it will not record without the track arm. There we go. Now I'm armed. So don't try that at home. You arm your track by setting this little button before you record. And because I have multiple tracks here, I have some muted, I had this one unmuted, and I just didn't pay attention. But how hard is it? Radios, etc. all shut down. And there we go. You see the nice orange there. We're recording. And then I would Control Z, And so that kind of works. Okay. So what you have here is that we can go through, and I just control Z. So I went back, and then I could press the R and it would do it again. All shut down. And there it is again. So it's not that big a deal overall, meaning that this guy wanted it. He wanted to do that. And he asked about this. He says, okay, what I really want to do, because he had some other program that did it, is I'm starting here at 208 and I messed this up. And I want to just go back and let the pre-roll restart. I don't want to press 2 keystrokes. And I kept thinking, man, what kind of loser are you? You can't do 2 keystrokes? And then it turned out that, well, he could do 2 keystrokes, and so could I. But the beauty of it is now I don't have to. And most of you that know me, if you've been in one of these, you know that I set this to the C key for, oh crap, I got to do that one again because that was so bad. And with just one single keystroke. So now what I'm going to do is start the recording. Radios, etc. all shut down. And now it's recording, and if I don't like that, sometimes I wasn't in the right place on the script. Radios, etc. all shut down. And it just keeps doing this. And every once in a while, I need to get a drink of water, because I realize I'm recording, and I don't like that. And so there's some other things going on there. What you see is that with one keystroke, I can go back. All right. I'm going to get rid of this guy here. I don't like him. I was playing around with something else here earlier. So here's the point. I thought it was stupid. In using it, my wife uses it too, and we both came to the same conclusion. This is the coolest thing, and you don't realize how handy it is. So let's go ahead and build this macro, undo, restart. And it takes advantage of some things that most people don't know. For example, if I take here this, I'm starting at the 6-second mark right now. And I'm going to just press the space bar and play, and I'll stop it here at 7 or 8. Which will tell you that their home is one of the most important. And I press the space bar again. Now, most people don't know that if I press the 0 key on my keypad, it will take me back to that starting spot. There's something different. And what happened is there's a difference. The space bar is a toggle. And the space bar toggles, I'll turn this guy off here. The space bar toggles. And so if I'm playing with the space bar and I press the space bar again, it stops. It starts and stops. It's a toggle. It goes back and forth, just like a light switch, on or off. If I'm off, it goes on. And that's no big deal. But what I didn't know was there's this one thing, and it's called stop. And when you look at transport stop, that's different than the space bar stop. If I'm already stopped, it's smart enough to go, hey, Don's an idiot. He's pressing stop, but he's already stopped. And what it'll do is it'll go back to this point. If I press it again, it'll go all the way back to the beginning. So if I'm sitting here, that's the last start point, and then a second one. So no matter where I'm at, if I press 0, 0, I always go back to the start point, just the same as pressing this little button down here, the return to 0 button here to get back to the beginning. But this is super handy that when you're recording, and let's pretend you recorded and you stopped here, and then you go, I really want to go back right to the same point I was. Well, of course you can go and use your mouse and put it back there at the 6-second mark. But if you had started at 6 before and you press the 0 key, then you're going to just go exactly back where you were before. That's super handy. That's one of those keyboard shortcuts that when you know it, you'll find you use it a lot more than you expect. Okay, you'll be surprised how much you use that. At least I do. And then after that, that's what it's the basis for understanding that if you're going to do a macro to do this, what you have to do is you're stringing together commands. And here's the commands I string together. Normally, or the way we have it set up right now, when we record, so I'm going to have a pre-roll here. It's going to go back to, I think I have mine set for 3 seconds. We're going to run to this point. We're going to record, and then we're going to stop. And then if we press Control Z, it will undo that, and it'll go back and set up here. Well, if I do this manually, watch this. I record. Homes for security and survival. In fact, most preppers. Oh, and then let's actually arm this. I don't arm. By the way, I never during these Hangouts, I use my monitors because it's just, I don't know, I like it better than using my headphones. When I'm recording, I have on my headphones, and so if I forget, so I turn that off when I'm not recording. So let me do that again. Boom, record. For security and survival. In fact, that's terrible. So if I forget and I just stop manually, most of you know this, you can Control Z, undo. Most people don't know this, that I also can take my 0 key now, because remember, 0 is, it recognizes I'm stopped and it goes back to that same point. There's where I'd started before. So even if I accidentally press the space bar, so for those of you that understand the Control Z concept, you probably know that every once in a while, yes, I want to Control Z and whoops, I press space bar. I'm in the habit of doing that. I'm in the habit of stopping. But you can manually undo, and then you can use your 0 key and you can go back, and then now I could press my R key and I could restart again. So the macro is based on those actions where it actually, we stopped with the space bar, or you stop with the stop command, and then we're going to undo whatever we did, and then we're going to end up using that 0 key and go back, and then we're going to restart. I'll only show you what that looks like. So I go to macro organizer, and that one is called, and I've called this 2 things over time, and let's see, what is it called right now? It's called undo record, and I'll show you the whole thing, and then we'll build it from scratch. If you choose edit, here it is. Transport stop, that's the one we were finding on the menu. Then there's undo, which takes away our audio. Then transport stop this second time. This is what most of us, I didn't know this at the beginning. That's going to move us back from where we really stopped here to the last restart point, and then I turn on the recorder again. So let's build that from scratch, and I'll show you how that works. And on my other screen here. All right. So watch this. So we'll build it from scratch. So this is what you are going to do to build this, and this will happen every time you create a new macro. So I'm going to say new. I'm going to title this. I recommend you title it something that means something to you. So Baarns restart. No, I'm going to do undo, because I want to say that I'm undoing. You can name these anything you want. Undo, restart, demo, and I'm going to call it 2, because I think I did one last night and it's sitting there. And then if you put them in groups, I don't think I can do this right now. I'll show you later what this makes a difference, and I'll just put it in the Baarns group. And then I recommend you put in a description, and then you throw in a date right here. And what's today? 9 something, I can't remember. We'll say, who knows? What is it? Does anybody know? Yeah, by the time you tell me, 9/19. Okay. And 2050. I know what year it is. What do you think about that? Okay. So put in your description, put in the date. I recommend that, because later you'll come back and thank me for that. Now over on this side are all the commands that you could put in. And what you'll see is there's an exhaustive list. And what are all these stupid things? Now, I don't know. I might know 10% of these. I might know a little more. I don't know. I don't even know what I don't know. But I don't know a lot of them. And if they already have a keyboard shortcut, they are over in that keyboard thing that we talked about earlier. But here's the beauty of this. I happen to know that I want to stop. So my recording is running. I want to be able to press 1 keystroke, and I know I want to stop. So by typing in the search here, stop, I just get a subset of these, and I happen to know the first thing I'm going to do is stop. So there's our stop command. And then we also, you might not remember this, but after we had stopped, in the background here, we had recorded something. We want to undo it. So if I do undo, it just narrows it right down. Edit undo. There's also some other undos here, and I'm going to add that. And then you want to know the third thing is, now sometimes I'll have a Word document up. I cheat. When I do it all manually the first time, I figure out it's on this menu, and it was transport stop. And then I knew undo was edit undo. And then I needed, transport stop again. And then what was the next thing I needed? I needed to, I need to start my recorder again. And but I happen to know that we're going to stop here. And we're going to use this same command that most people don't know about. We're going to add that one in. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to start our recorder again. And so I just asked for record. And there's a lot of different record options. I'll move this up on the screen for you. And I happen to know it's under the transport record one. And we're going to take that and we're going to add that in just like that. There's one more command I'll show you in just a minute that we're going to add into this in a second. But this is the essence of it. This is everything you need to make this work. And to reiterate, so I have my audio in the background. I record something and it's recording, and then I need to stop it because we're gonna invoke this macro while the recorder is running. So we're taping something. Well, can you tell I'm old? Taping. Most of you don't tape, but we can record. And we're gonna get here and we want to stop. And then I go, that was a crap take. Now you don't have to say that. You can pick another key. You can pick, that was beautiful, and use your B key. And then we're going to go back and we're going to undo what we just did. And then by using the transport stop again, it's going to reset the cursor back to our start point and restart our recorder. And it is simple and is beautiful, and you will be blown away how often you use this. So if I choose OK, now that macro is in this list. And what I have to do here, I know right there because I happen to use this group. There it is right there. So now we have the next phase of this thing. We already created the macro. Now we can do two things. I'm going to first assign it to a button. And this is kind of weird. I don't know if it's weird, but it's just, you can right click, or the equivalent on the Mac, command click, or if you have it, depends on which mouse you have. But you can, there's a little, it's hard to see over the Hangout, but there's a little tiny black line here separating this group. And depending on where you right click, so if I go immediately just on this little edge here and I right click, I could create a new group, a new button. So I'm going to create a new group. And then the funny thing is if you right click on that, you can go in here and edit it. And I'm going to call this demo. And so now you see in the background that changed to demo. And then I'll add a new button. And it starts out this little chiclet. If you're old enough to know what chiclet is, chiclet is kind of gum when I was a little kid. I don't chew it anymore, but I liked it. And then we now can go into assign. Now, one of the great things about this macro bar is, yes, you can assign macros, and we'll do that in a second, but I just want to make sure you also can assign a command. So that just means if you use something on the menu all the time, then you can take and say, for example, record. Pretend that you wouldn't do this. You'd probably go down here and choose the record button down here, but pretend that you used transport. There is a transport record or transport start or whatever else. But if you could go through and find transport and record and assign it to this little button here. You can assign any command that's on the menu. If you did undo, you could assign that one to this button as well. Okay, so and it even shows the macros. So it's you have two ways of doing that. But what I'm going to do here is right click on this little button, and I'm going to assign, and I'm going to assign a macro, and now it gives me the list of the ones that I just created here. And now the one thing that I'm always bothered by this is that they end up being in a different order here than they were in the other list. So you have to go through, and when you have tons and tons and tons of them like I do, then this is a pain. You won't have so many, so it won't be such a big deal. But there it is right there, Baarns undo restart demo 2. Now you see by default, it takes the whole thing and it puts it on there. And that's okay in some cases, but I have a tendency to abbreviate these things. I don't like them that long. So if you go back in here, now it's actually doing it, okay? So if you right click, then you can click on this right in here, double click, and now I can say restart or new macro or whatever you want. Name it something that makes sense to you. And now there it is. And now when I go through and I'm recording, we've got this armed, and I'm going to start right here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press my record button. It'll pre-roll. And then I have not assigned this to a keystroke. I'll do that in a second. But what I have done is assign this to the button. And so the button will work. The most important resources you'll have in a disaster. And now we're running, and I go up here and I click this. And it just keeps on working over and over and over and over again. The most important resources you'll have in a disaster. And maybe I should get a drink of water here. Sometimes I just let it run. I'm sitting here and I'm doing something else. Whoops, I need to change my script to a different page. I need to look at something and it's just running. And then when I'm ready, I go back and start this and it'll resources you'll have in a disaster. Okay. So I mean, sometimes I just literally let it run because I know that it's just going to get overwritten in a second. Sometimes I'll keep pressing that key 2 or 3 times until I'm, happy with that. But with that, that's all you really need to do in order to have that. And so Laura's saying, okay, I don't have a number pad on my keyboard and the number 0 isn't doing what numpad 0 would. There are different keyboards. And so if you're on the Mac, somebody last night told me it was working on their number 0 on the top. I don't know if she reassigned it or what. So if you have a keyboard, there's different keyboards in the Macs, there's compact keyboards and there's full-size keyboards. And so what you do want to do is if you go over, and I showed this earlier, the way to find that is if your keyboard doesn't support that, go over to this. And of course, most of you know this already. This is just really, it comes up in the browser. And Control or Command F does the find. And what we really want to do is find stop. And there's 3 of them. And you can see in my case here, let me scroll this up just a little bit. We're looking for this in the transport section so that you can see. So transport, and then if you're on the Mac and on your keyboard, it'll tell what it is. For example, for me, it's numpad 0. And if my keyboard had a stop on it, which my keyboard does not, but some do, and if yours does, then that would work. And then if not, we can still assign this. There is a the ability under, well, let's just do it. Shoot. Shut up, Don, and do. If I go into keyboard shortcuts and I search for stop, here it is. Right now, there's num. And then what you can do is if you don't have a key right now that's doing it, you can set this stop so you can get this Laura and anybody else to any key that you want to assign it to. So maybe your 0 isn't working, but if you simply want to go in here and assign it to 0, then that will give it. So I click right here, assign it to 0, I put a 0 in here. You highlight this, put the keyboard shortcut you want and choose assign, and now you'll have the stop command working no matter what kind of keyboard you have. And that is an issue. Different people have different keyboards. Every once in a while you'll hear somebody say this shortcut does this and it won't work for you simply because of what you have, which is fine. There's just a lot of options, and I have a full-size keyboard, but whatever you have, you can assign it. And then you can use it manually, which is good because there are times where that comes in handy. And these keyboard shortcuts, everybody should be setting up keyboard shortcuts for things that they use regularly. And after you set this up and you assign this, what you're going to find out is that your assignments show up on this. Next time you go into Studio One and you ask it to show you all the keyboard shortcuts right from here, excuse me, it's under Help, Keyboard Shortcuts. And when you do that and you get this list, it is customized to whatever you have done. And so that's a big deal. This is showing mine, and it'll show it in context to what you're doing. So Laura, you should be able to find that there, and you should be able to make that work for you in terms of either you set up a shortcut for it on any key that you want. You can set the 0 key to do that, or you can set it to anything else that's on your keyboard that you want, and then you'll see it here, and you can also use it in a macro. All right. So if somebody has a question on that, be sure to ask over in the comments there. And oh, I see Johnny there. Hey, all the way from across the pond. We've got somebody here from the UK. I think he's. Boy, I get in trouble there in case if he were sometimes somebody Scottish. Anyway, welcome. Forget. I don't remember exactly what. I know you're from across the pond. So good to see you. In any case, that's the important thing. Those keyboard shortcuts are critical. You definitely want keyboard shortcuts. And if one isn't there, that's okay. It'll still work for you. So this is a great little thing here. That'll work for most people. That was the first macro. Now I'm going to show you one other quick one here, and I've talked about it before. Everybody knows if you've been using Studio One for a while. Let me take this guy out. And you know that we need to set some markers here in order to export, because, well, you don't have to. I'm gonna get rid of number 2 here too. I'm gonna take those guys out. Probably there because I was messing with something. I don't remember what I was messing with, but it doesn't really matter. And I have this nice thing where whatever the active track is, we do this mark start and end. And what you see is that end marker was now as long as the yellow track. If I have the green track down here, then I use this mark start and end. And now my end is now working on the green track. Make sense? So whichever track is active is the track that is going to be the one where we set our start and end. And for example, this is always, I always have my raw audio at the top. That tends to be longer. At the very end, if I'm doing an audio book, some things have been edited out of this one, so it's going to be shorter. So if I export this track, the top track, then I'm going to want the markers to end up at the end of that track. If I'm working on this track, I want the markers to end up here. And yes, you can drag these around. And yes, if you know the keyboard shortcut, that's going to be on the PC, Alt-Y sets it. And if I went back to my little keyboard shortcuts, this is where I learned this, I think, originally. And I'm going to go to markers. And so if I look at markers here, and when I get into the marker, I just happen to know it's in the marker section. So let me go down. Here's macros, and markers are next. That happens to be right here. I learned this from skimming this file, and I highly recommend. I said this 2 or 3 times already. You're sick of me? Look at this file every once in a while and just scan everything and look for things that you do. This sets the start and the end of the selection. So it's a once you know that keystroke, then you can have this little thing that does everything at once, because once again, when I created this macro, all I did was look at this and say, what do I need to do? Well, you see there's events down here. If I'm going to use the green track, I've got a few events. I happen to know, and you'll know this as well, the edit, select all, and this is select all on tracks, and that selects everything there, and then Alt or Option Y is going to move that. And I took that and I combined that into a macro. And then one final thing about macros, and then I'll show a couple bonus tips and we'll be done for today. This will be, for me, a short one. Is that every once in a while there's something funky or weird or obnoxious. This process of, let me show you the macro here. Macro organizer. I'm looking for mark, start, end, and I'm going to show that, so I'll edit it. And people ask me about this all the time. Really, this is what I started with. Select all on tracks, because remember I did that manually. I chose edit, select all on tracks. So that was the first one. Then the second one, I use the equivalent of the Alt or Option Y. And then when it's done, I didn't like having all these things selected, because even though it set this end marker, I didn't want them selected. So if I'm running the macro here, you'll see that when it's done, it just unselects what I selected. It's just a personal thing. This isn't necessary. And if you wanted to, you could just bounce it within there, but I didn't. And then there's a couple other things. And this one, you almost can't figure out on your own necessarily, but unless you're a nut, which I qualify in that respect. What happens is there's well, I'll just call it a bug. There's something in Studio One that if you have the something selected, and I can't even remember, it's so long ago that I did this, you can have this macro fail once out of every 30 to 50 times. It's not that often. You can, I think if you go down here and you have this track selected, now it's not going to work. But if you, instead of just using the main steps, there's this thing where I'm actually flipping over to the start page and flipping back to the song page. And when you do that, so people asked me about this macro before, when you do that option where you flip here and flip back, then this macro works 100% of the time. So far, I haven't been able to break it. Now, 100% of the time is a little too much to say. I haven't been able to break it in the last at least 6 months. It may be longer than that. And therefore, I had needed a couple extra commands. And I should go back to our other macro, because there was a command for you eagle eyes, people looking at the macro that I did. I skipped one minor step, and I'll show you what that is right now. This whole macro, actually, this macro will fail in a couple places. Won't fail very often. It's going to work for you 90% of the time. But let me show you something. There's one more command that's important, and that's transport, return to start on stop. And return to start on stop is something that I use so often that I have a macro right there that actually toggles it. So what is it now? Transport, it's off. See, there's no checkbox here. Watch this. I click this macro, and now it's on. And now I click this macro, and now it's off. Now, how hard is it for me to walk up to this menu with my mouse, walk all the way over there, and return to start on stop? It's not very hard, yet I do it often enough because when editing, I'm going to be playing along, and when I stop, I want it to go back while I'm editing to where I started because I'm playing a piece of audio, I'm listening, I'm adjusting, I'm editing, I'm cutting something out, and I want it to go back, and I'm going to play it again and make sure my fix just worked. When recording, we almost never want that behavior. Almost never. I can't think of I can't think of any case while recording, because if I record something and I record a minute or two or three, and I have one of those few times where everything's working and I get 3 or 4 minutes in, I don't want to go back to the beginning of that, because when I did make a mistake 2 or 3 minutes down the road, I just want to go back a little bit and pick up right there. So I want transport not to return to where I started. I want it to stay where I am. Well, here's the problem. If this is turned on, then the macro fails, because the macro assumes, so I play and I pretend I recorded for 2 minutes here, and I stopped, and it went back. Now when I press the 0 key, it goes all the way to the beginning. And therefore, and I actually, if you watch one of my live demos of, I don't know, a month ago-ish, I had this happen to me in real time, and I couldn't figure out in real time what was going wrong. I forgot that this is something that is a problem. Okay, return to start on stop. I mean, it's not a problem, but I had edited something and I forgot that I had left it on, and I didn't toggle it back off. So that macro will fail, because the 0, which we are using, the actual transport stop, it goes from wherever the cursor is, and because I've already at the start point, it will go back to the 0. It would be the equivalent. So when this is off, it'd be the equivalent of pressing stop, stop, or 0, 0 in my case. I hope that makes sense. It doesn't ask a question there, but this macro will fail that we just did in the demo, and I'll show you in a few instances. Most of the time you're recording, you're not going to have this on, so it's going to work exactly as expected. If you have that on one time, you're going to go, what in the world's going on? It's always going back to the beginning. That's not what I want. No, 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 it doesn't work. All right, so here's what we do. Go back to the macro organizer. I don't know, and I go find that macro, which is going to be closer to the top here. And we have right here, and we're going to edit it. And what I happen to know is it was called return, and you have to spell right. And there it is, return to start on stop. And we're going to add that command and return to start on stop. Now, of course, it's at the bottom. So you can take these little up, down arrows here, and you go up, up, and you put that first. The other thing is it has an argument here. And these arguments are usually 0 or 1. 0 is off in this particular case. And I'm going to put that at the beginning of our macro. And what that does is, while I'm recording, it is going to turn off that option every time. Because like I said, it makes no sense in the real world while recording to go back to the start point of where I started recording, unless I explicitly want to go there. But most of the time I'm going to stop, and then I'm just going to go back 5 seconds or 10 seconds to the last phrase point. I am not going to sit there and always want to go back to where I started. The whole point is I record 3 minutes, I go back 10 seconds. I record 3 minutes, I go back 10 seconds, 5 seconds. I record 2 minutes, I go back 3 seconds, whatever. You go to the last phrase point, because hopefully the rest of that was good. And I don't want to go back 3 minutes every time. That's just a total waste. So what you see there is we do the normal macro, but then we have to account sometimes for something that we didn't expect. And that was something I didn't expect when I originally wrote this. And I think I used it for 3 months before I found out that that could come up. I couldn't figure it out, because the only time it ever happened for me in the real world was when I was doing a demo. So I'm live, doing this, and it just failed. But that's life. And then I figured it out afterward offline. Oh, that was the problem. And so that needs to be in there. and then there's other things. So that'll happen when you write a macro. Every once in a while, you need an extra command that takes into account what is happening for your specific setup, because everybody can customize 150 different things about Studio One, and depending on how you have things set up, depending on which options you've set, for example, is this on or off, then that can affect the way that macro works, because the macro does make some assumptions, and it uses this stop, and this stop has a different behavior in one case versus another, and by adding that extra command, it will work all the time. Okay, pretty cool, huh? All right, so if you have questions about that, ask in the Facebook group. I'm gonna show one more thing and we're done for the day. We'll keep this, I'm gonna try to get in under an hour, which for me is just unbelievable. And so how do you learn a bunch of these shortcuts, and how do you cut your time in Studio One? All right, I promised you to have some bonus tips and tricks. Well, this is not new, nor is it something that if you're experienced, you know about this, but I can't, it's amazing to me how many people don't know. There's this little question mark here, and it's called Info View. And if you have not explored Info View, you want to. Info View is this little strip that's just displayed right here below my macro toolbar. And what it allows me to do is, as I move the mouse around some elements in the interface, it will then put commands up here. For example, if I'm in the, what is this called? Timeline. Good. See, I knew you knew that. So you're in the timeline here. Whenever I'm in the timeline, now I can't move my mouse around, because if I move my mouse around, it'll go away. Watch, I put this down in the marker track, and then I get different things there. I put this down in the editing, the arrange part, I'm gonna get different commands there. So I'm gonna put it back in this. But now, here are the commands that I can do, things I can do with the mouse and the keyboard modifiers, and it's set up PC and Mac specific. So in my case, if I do, where am I here? If there's a double click, I learned this, if double click start stop, you see that one? So it's gonna show up right here, right under the word split. When I go into this track, you'll see 2x arrow start stop. What does that mean? It means actually I can go up here and double click, and it starts playing. I double click and I start playing, which is actually quite handy, because if I'm looking for some audio here, I can go up here and I can double click. And if you have it set up so that it will also use the blank space below, you can double click down here. And that's how I learned that originally. I was looking at this and I said, oh, double click start and stop. Now, is that going to say, change your life? No, but it actually is pretty good. Straight up above this, you see it's zoom, so I can zoom in and out. Now, some people also know I can use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out too. But there it tells up and down. If I press Alt key and click, it sets the end of the loop. And Control or Command, depending on what you're on. It also says, you notice the hand over. So if you start on the left side, it says time ruler 1. If you include the word time ruler, 1, 2, 3, 4, move and zoom. If I go up and down, it zooms. If I pull it straight left to right, it moves. And if you go up, so you can move, you can drag it left and right. Sometimes if you just need a little bit, that's a handy thing. Now, the first time you use this, I always recommend people take this and they break it out, they detach it. And then it shows up right here. And now all the commands are up and down. And for some reason, for me, it was easier to see what they were to begin with and kind of evaluate them when I had it broke out the first time. And what I recommend is you just throw this over on the edge. And if you have two screens, throw it on the other screen and hover your mouse over some different things and go, okay, this is this one. And what does this do? Now it doesn't give me anything over here. And then, although on some of them it does. So as you're hovering over certain things, you get some info, you get some information on what these items do. For example, this is Snap. Snap's got some really cool things. We don't usually use it. I use it for one thing, but if I'm here, most people know some of these commands. They know I can drag an event left to right. Right? And I can press Control Z to get that back. But they don't know all the things that are here. They don't know in the marker track what you can do and what shortcuts there are. And if you break them out and you have this open, you can see all sorts of different things that are good, helpful, and save you some time. Like right now, it says if I press Control or Command on the Mac, I'm going to get my, what's this called? The range selection tool, or this right here, so I can do that. And you can learn that, and you don't have to memorize them, but it's another way to get to them quickly. So I hope that helps you there. I don't see any more questions in the things. If you have a question, ask about that menu option. But I really think this is where I learned a lot of shortcuts initially. And after you break it out, now after you've seen it here, then it gets easy when they're side by side to see what they are as well. But I like it to begin with, broke out into its own little window. And I just thought it was easier to get a handle on them to begin with this way. And then after I'd done it a little while, then sometimes I just left it open for a little while so that I could see this. And I learned a bunch of little things. Oh, you can do this, you can do that. Very, very helpful. Great tool. And we'll go over some more tools later. So I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions about that, of course, be sure to like this. It's helpful if you guys like these. It's also helpful if you share this in other groups so other people get to see it. The more people that watch them, if people watch them, I do more. If no one watches it, I go, no one cares about this stuff. So why should I spend all this time? I mean, I do my rehearsal and I check and figure it out. And it does take some time. So, share it with people. That really helps. And then I know, okay, if somebody's sharing it, then it was valuable. If nobody shares it, I'll think, no one cared. You can give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this stuff. That kind of stuff. So be sure to join the Facebook group if you haven't already. Subscribe and like it and share it with others. And if you have questions or in Facebook, I'll put it in the notes for this, where to find us in the Facebook groups. But I appreciate your time. And we're going to see you. I'm going to try to do this every week. I tend to do it same time, same station every week. I'm going to go back and cut out the very beginning in just a minute. But I appreciate your time. I hope you have a great day. I'm going to stop the screen share. And if there's anything that you need, be sure to go ahead and ask in the groups. So we'll see you on the wires, see you in the groups, and we'll see you next time on the channel here. You have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye.